So, the trailer for Spider-Man Brand New Day finally released, and it looks spectacular. The suit is absolutely gorgeous. I love referencing different iconic comic covers, and I really dig the darker tone that they're going for in comparison to the brighter and more fun Home trilogy. Director Destin Daniel Cretton has really impressed me with his other work in the MCU, like Shang-Chi and Wonder Man, and from the looks of things, it seems like he really understands Spider-Man and what makes him so special. But I'm gonna try not to get my hopes up too much. You know how trailers go. If you get too excited, you're inevitably gonna set yourself up for disappointment. Holy shit, the CEO of Sex is back? Oh yeah, this is gonna be a 10 out of 10, baby. The thing that was a little bit weird about this trailer was the way they released it. The day before the trailer came out, Tom Holland made a video and he was like, we're gonna release the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer in a way that's never been released before. And then like an hour into it, you realize why nobody's ever released a trailer like this before. Basically, throughout the day, Sony released like second-long clips of the trailer up until like the full release. I understand why they did it, similar to the Avengers Doomsday, like the chair live stream, I guess you want to call it. It was a way to get people talking about this movie for literally the full day and force the whole news cycle to just be about that. So it makes sense on that front, but in terms of like releasing a trailer like that, it was a little clunky and a little bit weird, I won't lie. But I do really like how it centered cosplayers and fans into the actual release cycle. You know, I thought that was very cool and I respect that a lot. Also, this is just for me, but Sony, Marvel, whoever's listening, please, I am begging you, please start releasing your trailers in 4K. I can't keep living with this YouTube 1080p compression. It's so bad. But in terms of the actual trailer, there's a lot of things to get really excited about. From the beginning of it, we can see that Peter Parker is miserable. His life sucks. And that's fucking great. I love that. That's, oh yeah, baby. There's been this like recurring conversation throughout the Spider-Man fandom for a while about, is Spider-Man allowed to be happy? And like, yeah, sure he is. But if you ask me, it's better when he's not. Like this applies for most characters, obviously. You know, we want conflict and drama in our stories or else like nothing interesting will happen. But I think especially for someone like Spider-Man, where for me at least, a huge appeal of the character is seeing this superhero aspect of his life constantly be a detriment to his personal life and still choosing to do it anyway. I think that that's a huge aspect of why I love Spider-Man and why a lot of people love Spider-Man. And I don't want to sit here and say that the Home trilogy didn't do any of that, but it wasn't nearly to like the extreme or the level that I personally was looking for with those. And so it was really exciting to see like a total tonal shift from that. It would have been very easy for Sony and Marvel to see how successful the John Watts stuff was and just be like, oh, just keep doing that. Just keep doing the bright, fun, colorful stuff. But instead they're letting Cretton do seemingly whatever he wants with this. And that's really cool and really exciting. I like that a lot, especially after the events of No Way Home and how that set up this new era of Peter Parker's life. It's almost like heartbreaking to see him have to watch his life and what his life should have been unfold in front of him. He's watching videos of Ned and MJ at MIT, which is the school he was supposed to go to in No Way Home, and they're living their life and happy without him. And that's tough. On the topic of Ned and MJ, you know, I wasn't really expecting to see them make a return in this movie. I mean, I wasn't really following like leaks and rumors and stuff like that, but I really like how they're being utilized here and how this wasn't just an excuse to like introduce a whole new cast of characters and all that stuff, you know? Hell, we're even throwing Paul into the equation. Yeah, Peter's life really does suck. And I think it's really interesting that sort of in response to that, in response to how his life has turned out, Peter seems to be burying himself further and further into the Spider-Man mantle and using it almost as like a coping mechanism. That's such an interesting avenue to take the Spider-Man idea. And the quote-unquote Spider-Man stuff that we see is really exciting. We see a little bit of Frank Castle's Punisher, and I really like that little interaction that they have and like that glimpse of Peter's personality under the mask. For years, I used to never be able to picture this version of Spider-Man and this version of Punisher ever interacting. It felt like such a tonal imbalance. But now with this new sort of direction for Peter, it fits really well, and I really like that. He sounds like he's tired and he's like fed up with Frank's bullshit, and it's the energy that I've kind of been wanting out of Spider-Man for a long time. Spider-Man shouldn't be friends with everybody. Spider-Man should be pissed off at people. He should piss other people off, you know? I think it works really well, especially for someone like Punisher, and I really hope that this is how Peter interacts with the greater Marvel universe as a whole, like moving forward. And I really do love the recreating of iconic comic covers, which is something that I'm surprised hasn't been done in live action before. This one is obviously a reference to Amazing Fantasy 15 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, cover art by Jack Kirby. This one with Tarantula is referencing Amazing Spider-Man 134 by Jerry Conway and Ross Andrew, cover by John Romita Sr. and Danny Crespi. And then this shot with Boomerang looks like it's referencing Amazing Spider-Man 345 by Dave Michelini and Mark Bagley, cover by Eric J. Larson. Just gotta say, I love Boomerang. I'm glad he's making an appearance in this. This is really exciting. Hopefully, I wonder if this means we'll get like a Superior Foes of Spider-Man someday. So I don't know what the fuck's going on with Sony and their whole like Spider-Man villain movies, but it'd be really cool to see that get pulled from if they're gonna be introducing Boomerang like this. On the topic of the visuals, I have kind of like mixed thoughts. Firstly, I said it before, but the suit is suit's perfect. That thing looks amazing. It looked great at the end of No Way Home, but now we have a physical, practical one that's even better, not being CGI'd over. That was one of my biggest problems with the look of the Home trilogy. They took these gorgeous physical, practical costumes, they smoothed over it in post. And so it looks great here. It looks like the perfect level of like a little bit goofy, a little bit uncanny, but still really just like that. Like I'm looking at this and that's fucking Spider-Man right there. It looks so cool. But then in terms of like the actual visual design of the movie, it's weird. Like I look at half of these shots and I'm like, wow, that looks great. That's super cool. Like the opening shot, I love that sort of like upside down shot of him on his phone and stuff. But then other shots look a little bit more, they look a little rough, which is kind of par for the course when it comes to like big budget blockbusters nowadays. But it's hard to not compare things to, you know, the Raimi movies and the Amazing Spider-Man movies, which like say what you will about everything that came before, whatever. Both of those series look just gorgeous and they look phenomenal. A big part of why it looks this way is because they finished filming back in December, I want to say. And so they only have 7 months of post-production. Compare that to something like Superman or Supergirl, which are given full years of post-production to really polish out the VFX. I've seen a lot of people say that the comic cover homages, they look like AI. Firstly, that's never been something that I like appreciate. Like real people made this. Let's not compare it to AI slop. But I think the reason people are saying that is because these are shots that are taking essentially still images and trying to like animate them and make them look realistic. We've seen so much AI slop nowadays that any sort of like slow motion moving image is going to trigger that in our heads. One thing that I've seen a lot of criticism about is the color grading, but I actually kind of dig the color grading of this. It's not necessarily the most colorful movie, but there's clearly an intentional art direction behind the colors. It's a high contrast, muted palette because it fits the tone that they're going for here. Like that shot of Amazing Fantasy 15, sure, it would look better if it was brighter and more colorful, but clearly it's supposed to represent Peter burying himself in his work and sort of like the depression that he's going through. And if it were a bright, colorful thing at sunset, I don't think that would fit the tone that they're going for. Like, I don't think this looks like the sort of like MCU gray that we're accustomed to from sort of like the, well, like 2016 to 2019 era, you know? That visual look was very much like a lack of contrast. This feels more intentional to the tone. This feels more like Thunderbolts, actually, which is not a bad thing. Thunderbolts look great. Like, there's very clearly a lot of intention behind a lot of the shots that we're seeing, especially my favorite part of the trailer, which is this shot where we see Peter's eyes inside of the mask. That's something that, to my knowledge, has never been done in any Spider-Man media, comics or otherwise, period. And it's such a cool way to showcase how Peter feels inside of the mask. You know, like we've got the expressive eyes still, and I love the expressive eyes. I think they're great, but there's a sort of like emotional vulnerability that you can really only see with the actor's eyes. And it kind of reminds me of Iron Man, actually. I remember watching behind the scenes of the original Iron Man with Jon Favreau, and there was a really big dilemma on how do you showcase emotion with this character who has this metal faceplate, and they came up with the idea of having the camera inside of sort of like the cockpit, I guess you will. And this angle has become like a bit of a meme and a joke before, but I do think that that was a really revolutionary way of showing not just like the actor's face and like getting your money's worth with Robert Downey Jr., but also just like the expression and the emotion required to make somebody a main character. And it created a visual language for Iron Man that worked so well that it spanned his entire, you know, life in the MCU. And it was a creative vision that wasn't just pulling from the comics and being comic accurate. It was taking the live action medium and the comics medium and finding a way to bridge that gap and do something interesting with it. You know, technically it's like a skin tight mask that you wouldn't be able to see the actor's eyes in, but that's kind of the fun of movie making, putting the camera in weird places that doesn't make sense but shows a part of the story and shows a part of the emotion. Like, not even Sam Raimi, the guy who is the king of doing crazy shots and crazy angles, not even he thought of that. So I really hope that that's not just like a one-off shot and that's like a running thing throughout the movie. That could be really, really cool and really interesting. But let's move on to plot stuff and story things. You know, what did we learn from this trailer? The biggest thing that this trailer showed us was that Peter's like powers are acting up, and there's some weird shit's going on with him. We see him like passing out in the street and getting organic webs, and like his powers are clearly like in flux. And listen, organic web shooters isn't really my favorite thing in the world. I've talked about it like ad nauseum. I think that the synthetic web shooters showcase Peter's personality a lot more. But this version of Spider-Man has already taken so many like big swings, a bit of a joke, like with Aunt May being the new Uncle Ben and all that stuff, that like organic web shooters isn't really my top priority here. I've seen people say that it could be like the symbiote is slowly taking over and like it's already a part of him right now. And that'd be interesting and stuff because we haven't seen like the symbiote storyline since Spider-Man 3. But honestly, I would much prefer it if this is Man Spider, the spider part of Peter's body and his genetics and his DNA overtaking his human side, because I love what that represents in concept for Peter in this moment. He's at a point in his life where he is burying himself in Spider-Man. The identity of Peter Parker straight up doesn't exist anymore, and he's coping with that by being Spider-Man essentially 24/7. And I love the idea of using Man-Spider to represent that and represent like the idea of Spider-Man taking over Peter Parker and removing the balance of his life. I think that could be so cool. Sort of like an inverse to what happened in Spider-Man 2. In terms of villains, we actually see a lot of villains in this trailer, which could be either a very good thing or a very bad thing. But we see the Hand, the Ninja Clan, who we haven't seen since the Defenders, which that's really exciting. That could hopefully mean we'll get an appearance from Daredevil. This shot at the end of the trailer does kind of look like they might be like hiding somebody, because we've seen them do that sort of thing with the No Way Home trailer. But that could just be, you know, negative space. We also see Mac Gargan come back as Scorpion, and oh, that's exciting. That's my other favorite part of this trailer. Finally, after like 9 years, the credit scene of Homecoming actually means something. Thank God. Let's not mention how the Vulture's in the Morbius universe right now, but whatever. Whatever about that. Scorpion's back, and that's really exciting. We also see Tremel Tillman, Mr. Milkshake, as who's probably William Meltzer. He's an anti-mutant propagandist, I guess you'd say. I've seen the criticism that this looks like it's going to be too much for one movie. I get that, because we've had that issue before with something like, you know, Spider-Man 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I don't think that was actually the issue with those movies. Firstly, I love Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 3 fucking rips, but I don't think the number of villains necessarily dictates something being too crammed or too packed and stuff like that. Like with Superman, I saw a lot of people before James Gunn's Superman came out saying that there were going to be too many characters, it was going to be overstuffed and bloated and stuff. But really, like, it's not. Conceptually, there's a lot of different ideas going around, but I don't necessarily think that means the movie's gonna be fully stuffed. But that brings us to the biggest question, which is the thing that the movie didn't show us, which is Sadie Sink's character. We've known that Sadie Sink of Stranger Things fame was going to be in this movie for quite a while, but it's never been revealed exactly who she's playing. Personally, I wanted her to be playing Firestar and then bring in Iceman and do Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Or I thought with Punisher being in this movie that she'd be playing Rachel Cole. She was created by Greg Rucka and Marco Cicchetto, and she basically took up the Punisher role for a while back in like the 2010s. But after this trailer, it is looking more and more likely that Sadie Sink is going to be playing Jean Grey. And that has been the rumor for a while, and like basically like everything was kind of pointing to that for the longest time, because clearly one of the major villains of this movie is going to be a telepath, and we're seeing the sort of mysterious figure who's wearing the same outfit that we saw Sadie Sink in the set photos. I don't want to say too much on it because, you know, we'll see how this movie goes. We'll see like where it takes us before I really like form an opinion yet. But as of right now, it does seem a little bit weird to introduce such an important X-Men character, like probably one of the most important X-Men characters, as the villain of a Spider-Man movie. But it does excite me that, you know, it seems like the ball is getting rolling on X-Men in the MCU and the direction that they're going with them. I guess you could say that like the multiverse saga started with Far From Home. You know, Mysterio was a villain who pretended to be from the multiverse. And so there could be something interesting with like starting, you know, like the mutant saga, I guess you could call it, with the Spider-Man movie where the villain is somebody who's like mutant adjacent and stuff like that. I think that could be very interesting, especially because it seems so street level and like boots on the ground and stuff with like the Hand and Punisher and maybe even Daredevil, that introducing mutants like this could actually be like the perfect way to show how they impact the greater Marvel universe as a whole. And I think Spider-Man is actually a very good conduit for that. I do have a theory though, whether or not Jean Grey is actually like the main villain here. Like, I don't think so. I think there could be an interesting misdirect where like we think it's her, we think that she's the problem, but in reality it's someone else. It's someone like Tremel Tillman. He could be playing, instead of William Metzer, he could be playing William Turner, also known as the Mindworm, created by Jerry Conway and Ross Andrew in Amazing Spider-Man 138 from 1974. That would be a really interesting deep cut, and he is technically a Spider-Man villain who he's a telepath. And so if this is going to be Jean Grey, that could be an interesting like overlap of like technically it's still a Spider-Man villain, but introducing, you know, mutants and X-Men through that. But it is interesting that we still know nothing about Sadie Sink's role and like what she's gonna be in this movie. Is she gonna be Jean Grey, or is she gonna be fucking like Screwball or something? Like we don't fucking know. And I think that's really interesting. In an era where every trailer spoils everything all the time, I think it's nice to like genuinely know nothing and have like this core mystery. But I don't care about any of that because I have a better question. Is that Keith David? Throughout the trailer, we hear a little bit of a narration talking about spiders and like 3 life cycles and rebirth and stuff like that. We know that Marvin Jones III, aka Crondon, is going to be playing Tombstone, and I've seen some people say that that voiceover is him. But no, baby, that's Keith David. I know that silky, sultry voice anywhere. This is a man who knows how to get bit by a spider. And so my thing is, I don't give a shit about Sadie Sink anymore. Who the fuck is he playing? He might be like dubbing over Crondon as Tombstone, but like that'd be weird. I don't think I wouldn't like that. Technically, he did play Tombstone in Spectacular Spider-Man for like a couple episodes, but then because of scheduling conflicts, they had to recast him with Kevin Michael Richardson, who did a pitch perfect Keith David impression, mind you. But that'd be weird because like Crondon's a good actor. Like that dude fucking killed it on Black Lightning, and also he voiced Tombstone in the Spider-Verse. I've seen some people say that he might be playing Kurt Connors the Lizard based on kind kind of the way he's talking about like spiders and life cycles and all that sort of thing. And that would be really cool. That's like a great casting for that. But personally, I would love it if he's playing Miles Warren, aka the Jackal, which could lead to something like the Clone Saga later down the line. And that brings me to like the thing that I'm most interested about this movie. And it's something that I thought about when No Way Home first came out and like the ending of that movie, because that ending is so clearly inspired by One More Day, which is a comic that is famously not very liked, not very well received. And it seems like this movie is going to be adapting stuff from like with the J. Michael Straczynski like Spider Totem stuff and like The Other, which like I love the JMS run, don't get me wrong, but like a lot of those concepts weren't very well received. Even someone like Scorpion, that's a character that like I love him to death. I think there's a lot of potential for him, but he hasn't really ever had like a great Scorpion. We never had a great Scorpion comic. And in an era where like I'm constantly disappointed by comic book adaptations pulling from things that I like, something like Thor: Love and Thunder pulling from the Jason Aaron Thor run and just absolutely butchering Gore the God Butcher. It makes me want to see more comic book adaptations that are pulling from things that maybe aren't the best and kind of treat it as like a second chance to take some of these ideas and do something a little bit more interesting with them, And so like I want to see the Clone Saga. I want to see Mac Gargan become Venom, show these like bad comics and these like quote unquote bad ideas, show that there is something to them and breathe new life into them. I think they could be so interesting. And just in general, this trailer, it excites me again. I've been excited for this movie for a while, ever since we got the director announcement of Destin Daniel Cretton, because I've been a fan of his, but like it's been a while since I've genuinely been excited for a Spider-Man movie, aside from something like Spider-Verse. And with how the character like has been like in the comics and stuff, I kind of felt like I wasn't really a fan of him anymore. I felt sort of burnt out on the guy, not to mention like the, making videos and stuff and the Spider-Man channelisms. But like seeing this trailer, I was like, oh shit, I do like Spider-Man. Oh wait, I do like this. This is cool. This is exciting. And there's just so much in this trailer that excites me, not just, about the movie, but also like about the direction and about the creative influence that they're having here. And combine that with how Destin Daniel Cretton has been talking about the character and about this movie since he was announced as director. I really do think that this has a lot of potential to be something really special. But with that said, what do you think about the trailer for Spider-Man Brand New Day? And are there any bad comics that you think should be given a new life and adaptation? If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Special thanks to Ben May 3562 and Mantis Schwimp for joining the spectacular tier of my Patreon and channel members. If you want to support the channel for just $1 a month, you get access to all my videos early. And for just $3, we have a special Discord server and exclusive videos once a month. I have one right now about the new Lanterns trailer, since I know some people wanted to hear my thoughts on that. This has been TroyBoy17 coming at you live. Be responsible, not a Spider-Man channel, and I will see you around.